This is a article in the Irish Times, Valentine's Day Blues. Don't worry, you're not alone. This is something of a self-help article, and I found it to be a little bit curious. It's not bad advice, and I don't disagree with it, but it takes a good amount of time to do something which is very important, which is just to validate the experience of people who are perhaps not having the best time with this holiday. Whether because you are not in a relationship or because you're in a relationship that isn't working the way that you feel it's supposed to. It's just always important that whenever we are celebrating and getting excited for something, that we make a little bit of space for the fact that that's going to have the exact opposite impact for a meaningful, like non-zero percentage of our culture. And I appreciate that we made some time to have this segment and kind of acknowledge that, and then maybe even talk around some strategies for how to be well on a difficult day like this. What was y'all's impression of it?
I really wanted to
So,
hear your opinion on some of these points because
Sure.
I was reading them and I have to admit that I kind of thought a lot of it was bullshit. And I'm like, I can't wait to hear what Christy has to say because he's actually a mental health professional. And so maybe I'm wrong about this, maybe I'm not, but I really want to hear what you guys have to say. See if we land in the same place.
Hmm.
so it's
Well,
interesting that you point out like the parts of it were bullshit, because to me this was one of the most important and meaningful articles of all the
hmm,
articles we're covering, not because the information is perfect or good, but because it touches on a subject that we don't tend to think about in terms of any specific holiday, which is those that are suffering during that holiday, or those that are going through hard times or bad times, or that in the case of Valentine's Day especially, the holiday itself has a negative impact on them,
sure.
right? So,
Hmm.
I was very, very 50-50 about this article in terms of the information, and I hope we get to get more into that. But I did wanna kinda throw out there that this one was meaningful in the sense that it really hit on something that we can tend to take for granted.
Yeah, which is a really important point, right? That these things can be very challenging. And, Nate, you were talking about South Korea, but I certainly know people that have anti Valentine's Day parties and these kinds of things. And, that's great. Like, have fun with it. It's holidays are all made up bullshit anyway. That's not a bad thing. Money is made up. The United States of America is a made up concept.
A
So if we are
story,
going
yeah.
to just make up a holiday, that's totally fine. The fact that we have sort of all come together and said that this holiday, this particular day on the calendar is arbitrarily this, is fun because it's nice to be able to like share things. Holidays bring us together in a lot of ways, but whenever we try to bring people together, inevitably there are folks who are going to feel excluded, and it's worthwhile to spare a thought for them. So, Nate, I'd be really curious if there was anything that stood out for you as bullshit. But I want to just maybe broadly say that my impression, vaguely, of the advice in this article was like, well, yeah, sure. I mean, okay. Like there wasn't anything that I was like, well, that's not true. It was a
Right.
lot of stuff that like is true, but just saying it in the form of a maxim doesn't make it meaningful. And I think whatever advice we might throw out during this segment, whatever advice you might garner from this article or anything else that you might read about how to perhaps care for yourself around Valentine's Day, ultimately the thing that becomes important about it is that you do it, because there was so
Yeah.
much advice in this article that was like, well, yeah, you should try this and you should try that, and I can just imagine a million people pulling it up on Facebook and going, oh, that's a good idea, I should do that, and then not
And
doing that
not doing it.
thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
important to do the thing, and that's maybe like the most important mental health message that I can offer anybody ever, is that so often we're like, well, I get it. I get it. Like, I don't need to do the meditation because I know the meditation. Or, even if
Mhm.
you do sit there and like listen to the meditation, you need to do the thing. Be mindful, be present. And if you decide that you're going to spend your Valentine's Day home alone, sitting in the bathtub, great. But like, actually do that. Put down your phone, like actually enjoy that bath. If you're going to go out to dinner, be present with your partner. Don't worry about whether or not this is the best, most fanciest, most romantical Valentine's Days of Everest. Just be present and do what you can to enjoy the experience. But Nate, I mean, let me get back to you. Was there something that stood out to you?
Several things.
Sure.
Before I get into it, I just want to clarify that having some extra visibility for those of us who might not feel included on a day like this is a good thing. I'm totally behind that.
Mhm.
I just don't know if this article put it in a way that is constructive. So the first
Fair.
thing that stood out to me was I kind of the way that this article was framed before they actually got into the advice. It kind of gave me low-key incel vibes. But they've got a line in there, like a woe is me line about, well, the neighbor's dog is the only affection I'll be getting this year. And then there's a phrase about relationships are never as good as how they are in film and pornography. And it just seemed like it set the whole conversation off in a spirit of pity, which I don't think is helpful. Did
Yeah.
you guys get that at all, or am I the only one?
That was
no,
my very first note.
Yeah.
Laura, you go.
no, I was gonna say I got it, but I also found it very, and I don't even know if this is a word, like platitudinal, right? Like it felt like a bunch of
Yes.
platitudes getting thrown at me
Yes.
over and over again. So I think I love reading self-help stuff. I love the idea of getting stuff out there for people to absorb and read and digest, or videos or whatever. So I think it's all great. But this one to me felt a lot like a passing nod. It felt like, well,
Yeah.
we're going to kind of acknowledge that people are hurting at Valentine's Day, but we're not really going to get into the meat of it. We're not going to really get
Mm-hmm.
serious with it. And so one of the things, and I have it right here, it says, well, the answer is there's nothing wrong with you, right? And it's like, but no, literally there might be. Chemically, there could be,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Psychologically, there might be. And you might need real help. Or you might have just gone through a terrible breakup. So sure, there's nothing wrong with you as a person or as an individual, but that to
Life
me
could
just
still be
it's like
challenging, and those
it
challenges
glossed
are valid.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, before we get into some of the more, biochemical, actual real things that might be happening, you mentioned platitudes, and like I was
Mhm.
reading through some of this stuff, and some of these phrases, I'm just like, it just struck me. I'm like, this isn't going to help someone who's in pain or who has a real problem. Like, it's got phrases like, make the determination that from now on you're going to love yourself, or the mantra, I'm wonderful. Or the one that got me was create a kinder universe around yourself. I'm like, is Deepak Chopra writing this? Like, this is just a
Yeah.
bunch of manure that's this guy is planted on the internet for us. The
I think
one good piece of advice I did think was
Mhm.
avoid negative people, which is good advice any time of the year, but I thought was the
Yeah.
best advice in this article.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like y'all are both kind of dancing around the most significant thing that stood out to me about this article, which
Okay.
is that word pity. You used it, Nate. Pity is when we look down on somebody below us and feel sorry for them. What the people who are struggling around this holiday really need is compassion. Compassion
Yeah.
sees the other person as an equal, and it's not just loving kindness, it's loving kindness that is directed exactly and specifically where it hurts. I mean, that you can go right back to those Latin roots. Like, the word compassion comes from the idea of just being with the pain. And so
Mhm.
when you throw out some of these like mantras, make the determination that you're going to love yourself. I mean, yes, like, do that. But I want to see that, and I want to use that mantra, and I want to use these phrases, and I want to make that determination to love yourself, not from a place of pity, not from a place of self-pity, and certainly not from a place of being pitied by others. I want to do it
Mhm.
from a place of compassion, one that says,
Mhm.
like, yeah, I am going to make the determination to love myself. And repeating that mantra repetitively could potentially be like a meaningful step in developing more self-compassion and becoming a healthier, happier person during a challenging holiday or during a challenging time. But the way this article frames it and the way that it's discussed and the way it's sort of thrown out there like a platitude doesn't feel compassionate. It feels like
Exactly.
pity.
But you also have
Exactly.
to believe it. Like, you can't just tell someone, "Oh, just tell yourself you're fine," or "Tell yourself you love yourself."
That's the
Or say,
dismissiveness
"I'm
of
a
looking
winner,"
down on
right?
somebody. That's the
Yeah.
dismissiveness of
Yeah.
pity.
And when that person does so insincerely in hopes that, "Oh, if I just do this, it will magically change my mindset," but they're not doing it with true self-love, it's more contrived. It can actually make things worse sometimes where it's like, "Man, I've been trying so hard to love myself, and I just really suck at that too." Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Um
that's the trick of mindfulness for sure. Like, just saying the words is not going to do the thing. When you
Mhm.
say, like, I'm going to commit to loving myself, just saying it is not doing the thing. Committing to loving yourself is doing the thing, and that's what's so significant. And I think that's why this article reads, or just scans anyway, as so dismissive.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what set it off for me, was that it frames the conversation poorly and then goes on to issue platitudes with a bit of good advice sprinkled in. There's one more thing I want to get to, but Laura, go ahead first.
well, I was just gonna say, I think it is designed for maybe for people who are just kind of feeling down or are just kind of feeling a little off. Like, this strikes me as a kind of article that reads, if you're having a bad day, here's some ways to handle your bad day. And I agree with it. Things like taking a bath or taking time to yourself or reminding yourself of the positive things about yourself. All of that will help if you're just kind of feeling cruddy. But what really got me was, if you're really, say you're clinically depressed, none of this is gonna cure your depression. None of this is
Hmm.
gonna help you. And reading an article like this, and thinking that these things are supposed to help when they're not, can actually make you feel even more defeated. So to me, this read as the kind of thing that's helpful to sort of a surface level meh state, right?
Yeah,
To someone who's generally okay.
there's an
And not
insufficiency to it.
It's a bit superficial,
yeah.
yeah. I thought so
Yeah.
too. But to this kind of what I wanted to talk about kind of dovetails with what you guys are talking about, with Christy saying do the thing, and Laura talking about, actual people who might have a real problem, that they could get help for. The one point that it brings up is smile more, fake it till you make it, and smile more, because this will release chemicals in your brain that will make you feel better. And I read this and I'm thinking, will it though? Like, if I walk around grinning like an idiot when I feel bad, is that really going to make me feel better? Like, I am seriously skeptical. So I did some digging, and I actually did find a study from the University of Kansas that found that smiling more, whether it matched the subject's mood or not, actually was demonstrated to reduce stress, reduce blood pressure, reduce heart rate, improve the immune system. And I also found several articles that quoted mental health professionals that seem to agree with that. So, like, I have to say, like, I kind of thought this was a bit of snake oil, and I think I might be wrong. So, for all of my colleagues at work, if you see me walking around grinning like a moron when I'm really dead
He feels
inside,
like shit right then.
that's gonna be why. Be like, how you doing, Nate?
Yeah, well, it's
Great,
kind of the
doing
same
great.
thing that we've been talking about, because telling somebody, "Well, you should smile more and your life will be better," that's pity. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
dismissiveness. That's not
Yeah.
meaningful help. And to me, that's the danger of pop psychology. It's not that these ideas aren't potentially like valid or rooted in good research even. It's that reading an article that has like 20 great tips for how to be a healthier person is not going to actually get you to that place where you're meaningfully smiling more. You might read this article and you might say, well, I'm just going to commit to smiling more, and there
Yeah.
could maybe
Yeah.
be some value in that, but you're not taking the important and necessary steps to actually change your life. And that's what would concern me here. Not that any of this advice is necessarily bad, but doing the platitudinal version of some of these tips is not going to get you anywhere.
Mm.
That brings up a
Hmm.
good point, and you said something like pop something, I can't remember, and it reminded me of pop culture, and so I went and looked again at the source of this. It is Irish Times, but it's also just it's their life and style section, and so it's
Yeah.
just, it's a journalist who writes on life and style, which means they basically could have 0 qualifications in terms of mental health, and so that's actually really important for people to keep in mind, is if you do have a problem, going to any sort of column section of any magazine is probably not the best place to get actual, real, legitimate, meaty solutions to your problem, right? Pretty much anyone who doesn't say see a doctor or talk to a professional, and that should be somewhere in this article. And to my recollection, it's not, right?
No, I don't think it is
Um,
at all.
it,
I don't think there's
yeah,
any mention of, hey, you might actually be sad for other
you
reasons.
might actually
That's an
need
excellent point.
professional help. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we all we tend a lot to look for these really quick answers, or if it's written in a magazine or if it's posted on Facebook or whatever, it must be good advice. And honestly, this article doesn't have any meat behind it in terms of science or in terms of real methods that a therapist like Christy might use to actually break down what's going on with someone and help get them through it, right? So that's just kind of something to keep in mind, is like this article is basically a fluff piece, and it could very
Mm.
well just be someone's opinion.
Bingo. Bingo. Yes. That this is what sort of stuck out to me too when I read this thing, and I'm like, is it though? Let's actually see if there are studies to demonstrate this and show. And I'm sure that our audience here at the Nonprofits, being the critical thinkers that you are, would read this article and think, is there any substance to this though? But it could be dangerous to someone, who maybe doesn't look behind the curtain, so to speak. But Christy, what was your big takeaway from this article as the resident mental health professional on the panel today?
Well, really, just that same idea of pity, because
Okay.
so many of these tips I think could have some real value in somebody's life,
Okay.
but the way that they're presented, the lack of protein in these ideas is just really concerning. Like, it prevents people from meaningfully engaging with some of these practices, and that would just really be my concern. Like, it's not a whole grain article. Like, it's just the the cheap stuff.
I love your use of metaphor. That was
Yeah, I love it. The
absolutely stunning.
protein. Yeah.
That's great. Laura, what did you think was the best advice in the article? Before we move on, maybe we'll just touch on that. Best advice.
Well, I would have almost thought it was the title, which is Valentine's Day Blues. Don't worry, you're not alone. Right, like that right there was actually
Yeah.
the best. But
fair.
then in really thinking about it and letting it sink in, it's not always the best, because how often do we hear, oh, you're not alone, don't worry, as though that's supposed to make everything better. Like, somebody else lost a spouse, therefore I'm not alone. Somebody else like got in a car accident, therefore I'm not alone. It doesn't necessarily make people better. So upon reflection, I think what I got the most positive out of this was the intent, which was to acknowledge that Valentine's Day can be very hard on people, and to attempt to give some advice for things that people can do to alleviate that.
Hmm. Okay. Well, that'll be our takeaway then, is that the intent was there, but this was the white bread of self-help articles. But yeah, it was an interesting read. I encourage you folks to go have a look at this article and think about some of the assertions that it's making and some of the recommendations it's making, and sort of dig behind the surface and see if there is actually any substance to these, because actually, as Laura said, this could be somebody who has no idea what they're talking about. Very well could be.
Well, and like
But
Christy said, like, it is good advice, but if you need more help, don't think that this is all inclusive. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, absolutely.